Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome everyone to a collaborative webinar with Joy of SharePoint and Pate Group. So glad you could take time out of your Tuesday to join us. Today we're kind of doing something a little bit different than what we've been doing for the last few webinars. We're going to have an interview with our very own Bergen Rackley. So we're affectionately calling this Interview with the Intern. I kind of hate that it's not October because we could have gone full Halloween theme with this and it would have been a lot of fun. Maybe this Halloween we'll come up with something just as fun as this could have been. But again, welcome. My name is Joy Apple. I am Joy of SharePoint. I am a consultant and a modern workplace strategist here at Pate Group. Been playing the Microsoft game for a little over 12 years now, and I cannot imagine doing anything else. This is a wonderful, albeit hectic at times, time to be in the modern workplace world, helping people deploy Microsoft 365, get in the cloud, get online, become mobile ready. It's fantastic. And of course I have with me Richard, also a modern workplace strategist. Richard, how is your day?
Hey, Joy, doing really well. Happy Tuesday to you. It's hard to believe it's August already. You know, this is our first August webinar. We took the week off last week to focus on some things kind of in-house, but it's unbelievable how time is going by at this point. But thanks to everyone who's taken the time out of your day to join us. As Joy mentioned, my name is Richard Calderon. I am also a modern workplace strategist here at Pate and have been doing all things Microsoft 365 related for quite some time now. Really, our roles are to try to help you all focus on being as successful as you possibly can, leveraging the different capabilities inside the Microsoft 365 cloud, ultimately driving business value and to whatever type of business outcome you're trying to achieve. Those are the things that we just love to talk about every day, all day. And that's why we love to have these webinars here with you. So super excited about today's webinar. We are going to, just like we normally do, just ask a couple of brief questions from you. Go ahead and start with some poll questions. You should be able to get to these in a link that is in the QA window, and would just appreciate any responses you are willing to provide. We're not doing a kind of all-up Power Platform webinar today necessarily, but I thought maybe because we're going to talk about some of those kinds of things with Bergen, that it might be relevant to just ask some of these questions. So let's go ahead and see what kind of responses we've got here going so far. So in terms of job roles in the audience today, for those of you that have responded, we're kind of split right down the middle with IT pros and folks from managerial roles. Thanks. Oh, just went up one. And then in terms of leveraging Power Platform, let's see what we have here. Looks like we've got a few that are saying still trying to identify use cases, and that makes a lot of sense. You know, there's a whole lot to uncover around the Power Platform. You know, what is it? What are all these various tools? And then most importantly, you know, beyond what can it do is then how might I leverage them, obviously, within our organization. So again, thanks for identifying that. And then in terms of what kinds of Power Platform products you'd most like to learn about, looks like it's pretty even neck and neck here around PowerApps and Power Automate. I think that's good news. We're probably going to scratch the surface on some of those things here today, talking with Bergen. But then also, whether you are aware or not, Power BI, Power Virtual Agents, these are all tools and products in this overarching, amazing cloud-based platform that Microsoft has available called the Power Platform. Again, we're going to try to tee up some additional webinars here in the future, talking about some of these. So again, thanks for that input. And for anybody who hasn't had a chance to fill out this poll just yet, feel free to do that at any point in time as we go through here. So great, thanks so much. Looking good. Okay. Back to the presentation here at the moment.
Right.
Well, take it away.
Yeah, Bergen, thank you for taking time today because you are super busy. Not only are you working as an intern here, but you're also a full-time student.
Yeah, I'm on summer break right now, but I go back to class in about 2 weeks. And I mean, it would be hectic as is, but given present circumstances, it's noteworthily harder.
Yeah, but you love a challenge.
I do, when it goes well.
So tell us about your workload that you've had here at Pate Group during the summer Do you feel that it's just been, can't catch a breath and always go, 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 or we've been pretty good about managing that for you? How's that been?
It's usually been pretty good. There have been some weeks when there's just been very little to do, and there's other weeks where it's like, hey, we've got 5 clients and they all have 10 things they need to get done, and it's Friday, sorry. And the day is like Thursday.
Yes.
But that rarely happens, and when it does happen, I can usually get it done. So
Fantastic. Welcome to the world of consulting work. It seems to go that way. What's your caseload, or caseload, your workload going to be like when you get back into school?
I'm hoping for mostly the same. I plan to work as much as I can. Not because I need to, but because I want to. I enjoy doing it way more than I like school. So
Because you get money for it. I mean, that's not bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm paying for pain, but I'm like getting paid to have fun. It's no competition.
Fantastic. Fantastic. What kind of classes are you taking? I know I see, and if you haven't found Bergen Rackley on LinkedIn, he is out there. And I was totally looking over your LinkedIn profile earlier. And I mean, it doesn't come as a shock. You're looking at a bachelor's degree in computer science. Are you enjoying those classes so far?
I haven't gotten to take any of my engineering classes yet because there's a entry engineering program for the first year where I just take generic classes. So no, I'm not.
Oh, so it's not even any fun there yet.
No.
Man.
Unless Calculus 2 is fun, but no, it's not.
It is not. Richard, how did you do with calculus?
Oh, goodness. Let's not even bring that up. So we go back to things like any of the sciences and chemistry and biology and so forth. And yeah, those are fleeting memories for me. But I'm curious, Bergen. So, when you decided to go in and actually declare a major, in this case for computer science, was this at a point where you had already started doing, a number of different things in terms of programming and, the types of stuff, obviously, that you apply now in your internship? Had you already started getting fairly deep into that by the time you had decided, okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and try to major in this specifically?
Yeah, I've known for years that I wanted to do computer science just because, I don't know, I'm just my dad, but smaller. So I started in June of 2019, and we didn't declare our major until the end of last semester, so that was around May or March, one of the M's. And so I've been working for quite a bit, and it's only like affirmed that this is definitely what I want to do. I got a cool USB drive for joining, so that was neat.
Nice swag gift there. Yeah, I'm always curious, for anyone who's taking college studies now, whether they be, someone fairly young or someone who's decided to go back to school at some point, kind of what you feel like is the comparison of, again, you haven't started taking those particular courses just yet, the engineering courses you said, but I'll be curious to know from your perspective how you feel like the hands-on experience that you're getting interning here at Pate versus a lot of what you're going to be studying in terms of academics for computer science engineering, how that kind of relates to each other. I think at least back when I was in school, kind of doing the whole dating myself here, but back when I was in school, way back when, they always said that having those prerequisite courses and then obviously emphasizing within your major field of study that was the necessary education that was required to get out and actually start working in that field. And you see so much more and more today, it seems like, especially with young people, even starting off in as early as middle school and high school, already starting to get really deep into technical skills, whether it be programming, et cetera. And then just, again, interested to know, like, could you go apply those right away into work? Or is that something, again, that you would carry into your education? But yeah, we'll definitely be interested in understanding more about that as you go through them.
I hope that I learn things that are useful or things that like match. I'm not anticipating it too much, but I'm really hoping I do. And I don't just go to college for 4 years for a piece of paper and that was it.
Oh, that's a whole other conversation right there, I think, for a lot of us. A lot of us are accidental SharePoint or Microsoft 365 professionals. But I think one thing that would be kind of common between what you're doing with school and Microsoft 365 is, it's very evergreen. something is constantly changing in Microsoft 365. As you've become familiar with the tools, especially around the Power Platform, since you are becoming a developer extraordinaire, how do you feel about the pace of change when there are updates and features that are constantly rolling out?
I think that the Power Platform probably has changed a little bit more than my education is, unfortunately. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, when I was setting up a demo for this interview, I uploaded the files, and the way that Power Platform referenced just parts of items, like from a list, had changed overnight, and no one told me. So that was cool. Meanwhile, I mean, Calculus 2 hasn't changed in a minute.
Yeah.
So
it's true. It's very true.
But it is interesting. My major wasn't even an engineering major until like 10 years ago. So things do change, and I do feel the ramifications of that in college. It's a time to be had.
Well, for anyone that's not familiar with the last name Rackley or hasn't put two and two together, you are in a unique position to be interning at a company where your father plays a very prominent role as a co-owner and a chief strategy officer. What do you feel are the pros and cons of very closely following in your dad's footsteps in those ways, and perhaps having Mark Rackley look over your shoulder as you're working on client work here at Pate Group?
Anybody ever heard of Mark Rackley? You know, this one of these MVP guys out there, I guess?
Yeah, anyone heard of that guy? How many pucks does he have now?
Yeah.
Wait, I work with Mark Rackley? It's crazy.
Yeah. That guy?
That guy's so cool.
So
I feel like when I first started, I was concerned that people would be like talking about nepotism or whatever, but I think I've proven that I'm competent enough and I'm cheap enough labor that there was a reason for my hiring other than, oh, he's there and he's my son. So that's good. It's really interesting. We fight a lot more than we used to. There's a lot of arguments about work. And I mean, on the one hand, I'm his son, so he's probably not going to fire me. But at the same time, that has never stopped him from threatening it on more than one occasion. I mean, he's not wrong. I get too aggressive towards him sometimes, as my father. But
well, there's a level of familiarity there that you wouldn't have with a boss.
Exactly, but he doesn't seem to think that I would actually tone that down for a boss, which I would to anyone listening. Please,
a little shout out there. Nice.
But it's interesting, and also, you know, having him next door means that getting approval for things, I don't have to wait for someone to read my message. I can just stare at him until he acknowledges my presence. And if anything goes wrong, I can blame him because he's right there.
Nice.
So it definitely has pros and cons.
I like it. Which of the Power Platform tools do you feel that you've kind of gained more of a, what's the word I'm looking for, affinity for? Where are you leaning when it comes to all those good M365 tools out there?
So as far as the Power Platform goes, I've really only worked with Power Automate and PowerApps, but I feel like Power Automate has a lot of really useful features that PowerApps kind of leverages to be better. So on the whole, PowerApps is probably more useful, but it's useful because of Power Automate. No shade to PowerApps, but.
Well, no, none at all. Well, that brings up a question from Richard's poll too. So there's some folks out there that are struggling for use cases. Like, well, we know these tools are out here. We know there's things they could do, but we're just trying to figure out where to leverage those right now. Do you feel in this, let's see, year and some months that you've started doing client work and you're diving into this tool set, what would you say, just off the cuff, no prep work at all, what would you say just off the bat would be some good use cases for IT professionals and business users that are like, well, we know they're out there, but what should we do to get started?
If you have data validation, it's really good for that as far as flow goes, or at Power Automate, because you've got lists and libraries and people can add their own content to that. And normally, I mean, if you didn't have Flow or Power Automate or any kind of automatic triggerings, you'd have to go through there and manually review all of the content. And Power Automate really works as a great middleman. So if you're thinking about it as like what it can directly do, maybe it's not the most immediately useful thing, but if you need to send an email, you'd be a fool to use anything other than Power Automate. And if you need to change some fields automatically and do logic to calculate fields or any kind of data, Power Automate is the simplest way to go. So I think it's really good for that. It's also kind of, if you're a developer and you need to make REST calls, it's really easy for making quick REST calls. I don't think I've ever seen anyone talk about that, but I mean, there's a couple different tools built in for making calls to SharePoint or any other API, and it works really well for that.
And for our folks out there using Teams, I could see how being able to make that REST call to bring information and connections for Teams, that might be a win-win right there.
It's pretty good. It's really helpful for that.
Awesome.
So curious, how did you start getting yourself oriented with the capability, and then obviously being able to start developing in Power Automate and PowerApps? Was it starting off with a project that was kind of handed over to you, or did you start off by, okay, I'm just going to go out on the web and start digging into as much of it as I can? But how did you get started figuring some of this out?
I don't remember exactly, but I was probably told that here's this thing a client needs. I know it can be done, but I don't know how it can be done. This is all on you. Get it done by Friday.
Go figure it out.
And then I did a lot of research, a lot of documentation. Something that I've noticed since I started is that the documentation is never complete, and it's usually wrong anyways. So learning on your own takes a lot of time, but it's very rewarding when it finally does work, and it probably can be done. So yeah, I don't remember exactly how I started Flow, but it was probably something like, do this stupid thing that no one should ever need to be done and it's never been done before.
But we need it.
But we need it. This one specific use case, and it's useful for some reason.
And that's an interesting perspective that we struggle with that. You know, Richard's been doing this for, I won't date you, Richard. I've been doing this for almost that long too. And we get asked a lot, so, well, what do other companies do? Surely we're not unique. What do other companies do? I'd say 50% of the clients ask that question. And you just hit the nail on the head for that 50 or so percent. Well, it's pretty unique from customer to customer to customer. There's not always that cookie cutter solution of, oh, you need to do X, always go do Y to get the Z result. And then the flip side of that coin is sometimes things are very cookie cutter. Well, we've got a new employee that comes in and we need a process that can go talk to HR and IT and security and finance and payroll and get all this information and churn it out. You know, that's not unique from customer to customer, though the steps when they happen would be. What are your thoughts on some of the templates that Power Automate, PowerApps offers for things like that? Do you feel those are good places to get started, or do you rather just go from scratch?
To be honest, I don't think I've ever used a Flow template. I only clicked on it by accident and then quickly went back to starting from scratch.
Fair enough.
They're probably really useful for doing that kind of thing, but I also feel that the platform is pretty strong enough as is. Like, it doesn't take a lot of work to send an email. So if you've got some kind of approval flow that says send an email, there's a block for send an email, and that's a one-step process. So it does a good job at taking the parts that could be more complex elsewhere and simplifying it down to what you need and when you need it.
Gotcha. What's your
I think it's interesting.
thing?
Oh, sorry, Joy, jump.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to follow along with that. So I think it's interesting to get your perspective on it because, you know, Microsoft loves to tout a lot about Power Apps and its integration with Power Automate as what they refer to as no code, and then, you know, lately they've been calling it no code / low code. They're kind of trying to bring it in a little bit to say that, okay, it's not completely no code, but interesting to kind of understand that, you know, from some perspectives, you know, really, again, you're just trying to understand why would I use it, and what are the basic capabilities. And so if there's some templates out there maybe that aren't exactly like what you might need, but they give you a good head start to be able to say, this takes me, you know, 4 out of the 5 different steps that I basically need to accomplish, then just learning enough to be able to go and create whatever step 5 is, hopefully can help you get past that without having to be a developer, without having to know how to get too deep into code. But I am also interested from your perspective, as someone who has gotten much deeper into that. Do you feel like PowerApps and Power Automate give you enough flexibility from a developer's perspective to really be able to dig in deep and start doing the types of things that you want to do? Or is it really still limited at a certain point that you're like, okay, there's no way that I can do it. I would have to literally start writing custom code now to be able to get it to do something. What do you feel that it provides? Do you feel it provides you enough capability, or is it limited?
So there's Power Automate. There's Power Automate with like the premium license, which lets you connect to like Azure and run books. And I find that for a lot of creation stuff, that's pretty necessary. Like if you want to create a website or a site collection, Runbooks is the better option. So I mean that's code, but it's also built in. So they've given that thought in creating it to where if you hit that kind of wall, you're not screwed. There's nothing you can do about it. There's a way out. There are some things that I feel like get forgotten. I've never seen anyone really talk about it, but to my knowledge, you can't multiply values in Flow. So I had to create like a for loop and just say, okay, add this value 20 times. And that was how I had to multiply by 20 for a client. But other than these small little like niche cases, I wouldn't say multiplication's niche, but other than these small little things, I found that there have been very few times when I'm like, I need to do this in Flow, and it just wasn't there. In fact, I was making a Flow the other day, and I immediately resigned myself to being like, oh, Flow is not going to do this out of the box. I'm going to have to figure out another way to do it. And I spent like 10 minutes looking into it, and then there was a block in Flow that did exactly what it needed to do, and there was no work for me to need to be done. So for a lot of things, more often than not, what you need is there, in my experience.
Got it. That's great. That's great.
So far of the stuff we've thrown at you, what would be the favorite thing that you've gotten to do or had to do that turned out into a pretty good thing for you to be working on?
So for one client, I had to, they wanted an auction. So they wanted to be able to hold a silent auction for their employees where they could bid on items. And that was going to be done through a Power App, and that was pretty simple. But there was a bit of a hiccup in where they needed to be able to read all bids placed on the item, but they didn't want to create a new list for every item submitted. And they didn't want a new item entry for every bid placed, because that would become a lot of data really quickly. So I had to use PowerApps and Power Automate to read the version history of the list items and display it in like a list format. So it almost works like its own individual list or library for each auction app. And I've actually got that pulled up so I could demo it. Make sure I'm sharing the right screen. So this is just the regular auction app, and if you look at it, there's the ability to see your current items that you can bid on, and the past items, and the future items, and you can bid and place a bid. But the real complicated part was this admin app, which lets you see the item history. So we can look at previous items, and we can look at future items, and we can look at current items. And if you look at the current items, that triggers a flow that reads the version history of the item and then displays all of the changes. And there was some filtering that had to be done, mostly through Power Automate, that let me decide what actually was an item change for the bid and not just someone changing its property or its name. But it was pretty simple. I don't think I had to do any code except for writing a JSON body for my REST call. And it does this, which is, I would say, pretty complicated for a Power App.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you know what you're doing, it's pretty flexible. It's pretty powerful, and pretty fast. Like, there's a bit of a loading time, but it's triggering a REST call. It's getting the data back in return. Like, it's doing a lot of things. I don't think I could hard code something as fast as this is.
Well, it's also having to think about the security behind it too, because
It's true.
by virtue of having an admin page built into this, that means only select people would be able to access it. So, we're used to, those of us that have been in SharePoint world for a long time are used to the concept of the security trimming that comes into place. So this admin app is, validating security and pulling up your criteria. Very cool. So then anybody that wanted to be able just to see what was out there and place a bet, that pretty much open, anyone in the corporation has the ability to browse and place bets on the content.
Yeah, I think anyone who has access to the library gets that kind of permission. I think it's all kind of wrapped together. So it's pretty nice.
What were your go-to resources for coming up to speed? So for this, to be able to go look at version history, what would you say were the best resources that you used to be able to come in and do this?
Google.
I
usually start with the documentation, even though I have my own issues with the people who write it sometimes. But it could be an okay place to start. But I'll usually just be like, okay, SharePoint, REST API, get version history, find the proper API to hit, and then I used Flow and the HTTP request for SharePoint, and it was done. I did this in an afternoon. It was not hard. It was a lot simpler than I would have anticipated it being.
What if the customer comes up and says, yeah, but can I get to it on my mobile phone?
Yes. This would probably look weird on mobile because it's, well, I guess you turn your phone sideways, but yes, the cool thing about PowerApps is that it's got multi-platform support. You don't have to worry about, when you're hard coding a web part, you have to worry about like browsers and different supported web functionality and CSS, and oh, this monitor's got a 4:3 aspect ratio, so you've got to recode everything because we hate you. PowerApps doesn't have that issue. It's really, really lovely.
Fantastic. Okay. Richard, I think we need a Pate Group auction app.
I think so too. And I think we might have one ready to go.
Built right in.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Anybody have any questions that they would like to ask Bergen when it comes to getting started with this whole Power Automate, Power Platform tool set that we've got out there? Use cases is always hard. Richard and I have the pleasure of sitting down and working with clients one-on-one, and some of the questions we ask are, do you have any processes right now where you physically have to go down the hall and ask someone to sign a piece of paper? Are you emailing people over and over and over again to please go review this thing and approve it or deny it? Do you have pieces of paper where you mark things off, checklists, to-dos? Are you writing your tasks on a whiteboard? All kinds of things like that are perfect for getting started with your Power Platform. Onboarding is probably one of our most popular. Bergen, have you done any onboarding work?
I don't know what that is, so I'm going to say no. Refocus? Jeez.
Your webcam's acting up, huh? So onboarding is when a newbie comes into a company and it's time for them to get their user ID. Maybe IT needs to set up an account for them. So they have their username, their password. They need to know what kind of machine to get ready. HR needs to make sure they've got their benefits package ready, all that fun stuff. So when we start to automate something like that, it can really turn into a very large workflow. Now, in the olden days, I would typically recommend we break that up into many small workflows. As a workflow developer, you probably have your own opinions on one big one or lots of little ones that one calls the other. But anything like that you've had the pleasure of working on with Pate Group so far?
With one client, there's been, so something that does bother me is whenever there's like a lot of flows that get triggered at the exact same time by the exact same thing.
Yes.
But I don't always see anything wrong with a workflow triggering a workflow. Usually I do it all in one if I can like scope it and make it easy to tell what's going on. But if there's completely independent things that are just happening at the same time, there's no reason to not have local flows for it.
Gotcha. All right. Any questions out there? No? All right. Richard, any more, or do we have any more burning questions for Bergen before we let everybody get back to their Super Tuesday?
I think, just from the internship perspective again, just curious, what was there anything that you've learned so far being here at Pate that you're like, oh, okay, I wasn't expecting that I would be able to learn that, or I wasn't expecting that this experience was going to be something that was going to turn out to be something that, obviously I can carry along in my education, anything like that that's popped up for you just yet?
I never really realized how much I enjoyed problem solving. Like I knew I enjoyed it a little bit, but it's really crazy how satisfying it is to have a problem that makes you want to slam your head into a wall for like 5 hours, and then it suddenly fixes itself, and it all works, and then you have to make a revision to it, and it all breaks. Then you fix it again later, and it works again. It's the most rewarding thing I think I've experienced.
That's great. That's great. I would say that when you're fortunate enough to experience that again and again in your professional career, that's a blessing for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely, there's lots of more of that to look forward to. Speaking for myself again, obviously Joy and I do a lot of the same things here, but we are continuously learning. And you have to these days in our field, right? You cannot be complacent and say, well, what I learned 5 years ago, for sure 10, 20 years ago, is necessarily helping me be that much more relevant in what we do today. It's really a lot about, what have you learned lately? What have you applied lately? And I think all of these Power Platform tools, and especially, trying to find, again, those use cases for why this would be something that's going to help your business be able to accelerate. That's really key, so the only way that we can do that is we've got to continually be out there open-minded and growth mindset, as they often say, and continue learning. So, great job where you're getting so far. Definitely going to be interested to see how going into the next year of school, what you're able to learn again, and then come back and apply more of that. I'm anxious to learn as much from you as hopefully, we all can help share what we know with each other.
Absolutely. All right. That's going to bring us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here. Bergen, thank you so much for coming in, for sharing with us your journey, for getting on with the Power Platform and the things you've been working on. We greatly appreciate your time. For everyone that wants to come be a part of the next webinar, that will happen this next Tuesday, the 18th. Richard and I are going to dive into OneNote. So we'll be back to our regularly scheduled Illuminating Microsoft 365. If you want to catch up with us on LinkedIn, we've got the QR codes here. Bergen, I apologize. I didn't think to go get your QR code for LinkedIn, but Bergen Rackley, he's out there. He's on Twitter. He's on LinkedIn. I don't know. Do you Instagram?
I do Instagram, but not about work.
It's still a fun space to be trying to work into for SharePoint, I will say. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks so much.